So as you can tell by this respective video, I am not in my usual filming location. I am in the middle of traveling. This video was supposed to go up quite a while back, not too long after the actual reveal of Goodreads Choice Awards winners, but unfortunately, though I had a video that showcased my live reaction, like my live blind reaction to the winners. Unfortunately, the video for that did not record the audio, so I've had to redo it. So this is going to be my reaction video to the Goodreads Choice Awards winners. It's not going to be blind, but at least it's going to be a reflection of what I've been able to glean from the winners and my respective reactions to it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as T8 Summers. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my reaction to the Goodreads Choice Awards winners, and I'll have quite a few reflections on each of the winners in each category as we go through each of the results and how many votes each book got in terms of things. So let's just go ahead and dive in and go ahead and get started. All right, I think we've got everything situated. So let's see, this is the Goodreads Choice Awards 2024. Reader's Favorite Books of 2024, the 16th Annual Goodreads Choice Awards, and we're just going to go ahead and dive in and view results. So let's go ahead and get started. So for Reader's Favorite Fiction, which is the first category, the winner with 94,733 votes was The Wedding People. And this was one that I wanted to read, but I have not had the opportunity to do so. So this won by quite a bit, it seems like. I would have thought that the winner of this respective category was the what ended up being the second highest vote total, which with 67,268 votes, Sally Rooney's Intermezzo. I have that on my reading list to be able to get to. I have not had the opportunity to pick it up. It was at my library, but it has like 10 billion holes, so I was not able to pick that one up, but at least I have it on my TBR to be able to read. And you'll probably hear me say this in terms of the things. I did try to pick up as many Goodreads Choice Awards finalists as I could between the time that the finalists were announced, as well as the winners were announced in terms of things. But unfortunately, for a lot of the books that I wanted to pick up, either my library didn't have it or I wasn't able to finish the books that I had wanted to pick up who were part of the finals for each of the categories. But I did get to some, and we'll get into that as I go through each category. And I'll give my respective reflections on those as I go through it. But you'll hear me talk about the ones that I was able to finish and which ones I weren't. So to continue on with this, so The Wedding People won with 94,733 votes. Sally Rooney came in second with Intermezzo with 67,268 votes. And then Huang Bo Rim, who wrote Welcome to the Hungdong Bookshop, had third place with 51,958 votes. Blue Sisters by Coco Malors got 50,659 votes and was in fourth place. I'm actually not surprised that Blue Sisters did as well as it did, and I'm glad that it did. I am probably number 52 on the waiting list for that particular book, so I was not able to pick it up, unfortunately, but it is on my TBR. I am on hold for it at my library, so hopefully I'll be able to get a chance to read that. But that was one that I really anticipate wanting to read. Same thing with Sally Rooney's Intermezzo. I really want to read that as well. Let's keep on going. You can see the other winners, finalists, runner-ups. So Leanne Moriarty, I am not surprised that that got in fifth place with 48,432 votes. Though it's interesting, like I think with Leanne Moriarty, that author is doing as well as they're doing because of name recognition. I haven't heard too much about Here One Moment. unfortunately. So that is on my TBR, but I really just don't have a lot of information in terms of how people thought about it. It has a decent average rating with 4.08 on Goodreads with 84,496 ratings. So definitely people have added it to their TBRs and have rated it specifically, but it's just one that in my actual person in terms of things, I haven't heard much about how people receive that. But it did get 48,432 votes and it got in fifth place, so that makes sense. Ellen Hildebrand's Swan Song. That is one that I am planning on reading. I'm actually reading right now, as of the time that I'm filming this video, the book that preceded in this respective series. This is part of the Nantucket series. I'm actually reading The Five-Star Weekend, which comes before this book right now. So I'm in the middle of that one. I think I'm about 23% into it, and I actually really like it so far. And I've read from Ellen Hildebrand before, so Ellen Hildebrand is an author that I'm very familiar with and like. So I do plan on finishing the Five-Star Weekend and then going into Swan Song afterwards. But I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to be able to start it. It got in sixth place with 41,212 votes. I have actually heard people have picked that up and that they actually did like it from what I've heard. So I do have in my queue to be able to read. So we'll see how that works out, and I'll give my review on the Five-Star Weekend as soon as I'm able to finish it. Moving right along, Dolly Alderton's Good Material. I haven't heard a lot about that. That got in seventh place with 33,508 votes. So it is on my TBR, so I do plan on reading it. See, I hope this finds you well. Made it in eighth place with 30,650 votes. I don't really have a lot to say about that one, but it is on my TBR. Ruthie Thorpe, Margot's Got Money Troubles. That got in ninth place with 27,439 votes. Martyr, which is the one that I voted for, got in 10th place with 25,992 votes. That is also on my reserved list for my library. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pick it up before the voting closed and before the winners are announced, but I am planning on reading that as soon as I get the opportunity to do so. Some of the others that were nominated that didn't get past the first round, and you can tell by the difference in vote totals that they didn't make it past the first round. We're just going to go through these quickly. There's Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. So it looks like it's a follow-up to finalist Tommy Orange's breakout bestseller, They're There. That one I may have to look into a little bit more in terms of the reviews, but it got a total of 9,041 votes for the Goodreads Choice Awards in terms of the first round. And then second, the 12th place finisher with 8,546 votes was Real Americans by Rachel Kong, followed by Sandwich by Catherine Newman. I will put that on my TBR just to be able to see what it's about. And I may have to read reviews of it to see how people have received it, but it did get nominated in the first round and it lost in the first round. Then there's Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. I know who Elizabeth Strout is. That got 7,276 votes. Followed by All Fours by Miranda July, that I have not heard of. 5,655 votes. Yeah, a lot of these are not titles that I am familiar with that didn't make it out of the first round, so I don't have a lot to say about them. Not saying that they aren't good books, and if you have read any of these books that I am mentioning that I'm not familiar with, let me know if it's something that I should add to my DBR, or how you feel about it, because I am interested in being able to read more of these books, even though I haven't, I'm not familiar with them. So Playground by Richard Powers came in the next place with 5,039 votes, followed by Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo, 4,746 votes. Again, I have not heard of that author or that book. Louise Edridge, I'm very familiar with. The Mighty Red is already on my TBR. I am very surprised to see how low it got for total votes, which was 4,021 votes. And then followed by Greta and Valden, which was 3,757 votes. It's a novel by Rebecca K. Riley. That one I have not heard of either, but it is on my TBR. Let's see. Oh, I wait a minute. I have heard of this particular book. It was recommended to me, so I did add it to my TBR. So that is something that I am going to be able to read. It says it was originally published in 2021, and it's an international bestseller. So I think it qualified because if I remember correctly, it's a translated novel. So that is one that I did want to read. And then the last place, Greta Valden got 3,757 votes. And then the last place book in this respective category got 2,151 votes. This was Colored Television by Danzy Senna. This one I have not heard of. It's a dark comedy. That one I may have to look at reviews for to see if that's something, but it was a Good Morning America pickup, if I remember correctly. So yeah. Um, it's not one that I've heard of in terms of how people felt about it, but I am going to investigate that a little bit, and then if it's something that I want to pick up, and then I can add it to my TBR. If you've read it, what do you think about it? I'm curious to know. All right, so that's everything in reader's favorite fiction. Let's move on to historical fiction. I'm not going to be too surprised to see like a few people be in the top spots for this. So and it's been a little bit since I've looked at the winners, so I forgot the exact order, but I do know who made the top spots. So let's go ahead and go into that. So, to no one's surprise, Kristen and Hannah's The Women won for readers' favorite historical fiction for the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2024. I am not surprised at that at all, and it is on my TBR. And I've actually heard multiple people, like even from like my workplace and some of my peers who said, Rose, you have to read The Women, you have to read The Women. I'm like, okay, so it's on my TBR. I'm definitely planning on reading it. But it won with a total of 253,147 votes. That's a hefty chunk. And that was the majority of all of the vote totals for with respect to this category, which was 546,063 votes total. Actually, let me go back very briefly to fiction and see what the vote total for fiction was, just to be able to kind of clarify that. So for fiction, the total amount of votes was 530,191. So that's really interesting. That's really interesting in terms of the percentage of people who voted for the first place winner relative to all the votes that were cast. And if you look at historical fiction, if you go back to the historical fiction category, looking at the vote totals, overwhelmingly amount of votes for The Women by Kristen and Hannah. I'm happy to see that James got second place by Percival Everett, but look at the gap between these two. Oh my word. But Definitely, the first two are on my TBR to be able to read. I literally just picked up James by Percival Everett, like with an audio credit. So I am planning on reading on James. There were too many holds at my library to be able to pick it up between the time that the finalists were announced as well as the winners, but it is on my TBR, and that is something that I'm planning to read definitely over the holiday break to be able to get a chance to read it. Kristen Hanna's The Women I am on hold for with my library, but I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to pick that up, just because like it's like triple digits in terms of the queue, so it's going to be a little bit, but hopefully my library gets more copies of The Women so I can be able to read that in a timely manner. But James is in my personal library, and I am going to plan on reading that during the holiday break and give my thoughts about it as soon as I possibly can. But I'm happy it made second. I'm actually happy about both the first place winner and the second place winner for this one, though my specific pick did not make it, unfortunately. But I'll get to that in a little bit. But James got second place with 62,431 votes. Third place went to The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon with 47,850 votes. I'm not surprised. I didn't hear much about The Frozen River, but like since I looked into it between the announcement of the final round and now, I know a little bit more about it, so I am going to be able to read this as soon as I possibly can. I've heard a little bit more about the Book Lovers Library, which came in fourth place with 32,873 votes. This is by Madeline Martin, and it is um, a wartime story in terms of taking place in England. I do know a couple of people who are reading the Book Lovers Library and are supposed to get back to me in terms of how they think about it. So I'm going to hold off on adding it to my TBR, but I do find the premise of it interesting. And it is interesting that it came in fourth place with as many votes as it did relative to the number of people who voted for it. So let's go ahead and continue. I am very happy to see that the Lion Women of Tehran got fifth place with 24,781 votes. That's great. That is on my TBR already, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I am planning on reading it. Judy Colt by Any Other Name. That's another popular author, popular cited author. I've at least heard of a couple of people who have read this particular work and had mixed opinions about it, but I'm still going to read it. It came in sixth place with 24,147 votes. I am surprised at that low vote total considering how popular that author is. I don't. I do know that there have been mixed opinions about it, so but I'm still going to be able to pick it up to read. Next is Kate Quinn, an author I'm familiar with. The Briar Club I haven't heard much from, but it came in seventh place with 23,252 votes. I'm going to probably look into more reviews on that one and kind of wait for like some of my peers to be able to talk with me about it. But it may be one that I end up picking up reading. I'm just not sure right now. Then Beatrice Williams came in eighth place with Husbands and Lovers with 15,892 votes. Really not much to say about that. That is one that I added to my TBR, and I do want to be able to read that. I am very familiar with Beatrice Williams. And then the vote that I really wanted the Southern Vale of Salome to do better than what it did. It got ninth place with 14,864 votes, and it did make it past the first round, but I'm kind of disappointed it didn't do better. From what I've read part of it, but I have not read the full of it, and it was also a Good Morning America pick. I love Sylvia Moreno Garcia's writing. I love the different genres that she right? And this was one that released, I think, around the time of my birthday. So I did pick up the book. I have not had the opportunity to be able to finish it, but I do want to finish it and give a review before the year is up. So I'm probably going to put that on my priority list to be able to finish before the end of the year and give my thoughts about it before 2024 closes out. But I'm glad that it made it past the first run and that it made ninth place. I just wish it had done better. And then the last of the top 10 with Anita DeMont last uh, got 12,716 votes. This is one that was a Reese's Book Club pick. I did hear a little bit more about it, so it is on my TBR, and I am looking forward to being able to read that and see um, in terms of like what other people have thought about it. I'm curious based on the premise of it, so that should be interesting to be able to pick up. And then we get into the books that didn't make it past the first round, so you can see the difference between the vote totals. The first one is There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. This is from the Booker Prize finalist author of The Island. That looks like something that I would read, so I'm going to add that to my reading list. I haven't heard much about that actually, so that is one that I'm curious about, but I just have not heard much about it. And then following up with that, in 12th place is Behind Every Good Man by Sarah Goodman Cofino with 4,345 votes. A wrong wife is toe-to-toe with her cheating husband at the polls in this hilarious and heart-lifting novel by best-selling author of Don't Forget to Write. I have not read from this author and I have not heard much about this respective book. So I'm going to hold off on adding that to my TBR and do a little bit more digging in terms of how many people that I know that have actually read it. So it has 4.35 average rating and 12,515 ratings on Goodreads. So it is something that I'm going to look into, but I don't know if I want to add that to my TBR just yet. So let's keep on going. All right, in the next place is Cole Tobin's Long Island, the second book in the Ellis Lacey series. I have not heard of this. Mm, this is historical fiction. I'll hold off on that especially since I haven't even read the first book in that respective series. Then it's followed by The Paris Novel by Ruth Reichel. 1980s Paris. Interesting. Hmm. That one I'm gonna have to probably research a little bit more because I do um want to know a little bit more about it before I add it to my TBR. But it has quite a bit of ratings. It actually has um let's see how many ratings did Behind Every Good Man have? So that's interesting that this ended up on a lower place than Behind Every Good Man. And what was the average rating for this one? 3.82. Okay, so this one had a higher average rating than this one did. Okay. Hmm. But yeah, I'll hold off on adding that to my TBR until I can do a little bit more research on it. If you've read it, what do you think about it in terms of things? It seems interesting because it says it takes readers on an adventure of food, art, fashion in 1980s Paris. So that definitely like is more modern than some of the historical fiction that I've picked up, but it's interesting. I do admit it's interesting and like it has my curiosity that I want to research it a little bit more. And then in the following, like the Paris novel had 3,692 votes compared to Long Island, which was 4,180 votes. The following book, The Great Divide by Cristina Enriquez, got 3,295 votes. see, this is the construction of the Panama Canal. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit more digging in terms of whether or not that I'm going to add that to my TBR. Moving onward, the next place with 3,263 votes was The Love Elixir of Augustus Stern by Linda Cohen Oakman. Yeah, I'll do some more digging on that one to see whether or not that's something that I'll add to my TBR. As you can tell, like I do read historical fiction, but not so much that I would add all of these to my TBR without doing a little more research first in terms of what I'm interested in and what I choose to pick up. So then we get to the last row here. The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. I'm kind of surprised that it is this low. It got 3,072 votes. This was one that I have heard of and I did want to read, but I have not had the opportunity to pick up, but I do plan on reading it. And then that's followed by, with 3,015 votes, The Bullet Swallower by Elizabeth Gonzalez James. This is magical realism. Interesting. Okay. That one I'm going to do a little bit more research on before I put it to my TBR. If you've read it, what do you think about it? I'm gonna ask that like probably multiple times, especially for some of these books that I am not as familiar with. And then for the final two places for the category of historical fiction in the Goodreads Choice Awards, we have Kate Quinn and Janie Chang, The Phoenix Crown. This one I have not heard of either. Intertwined lives of two wronged women spanning from the chaos of the San Francisco earthquake. Interesting. Okay. This one I actually will probably put on my TBR. Yeah, that seems interesting to me. And then Lisa Wingate did Elterwood, that came in last place with 1,946 votes. I have not heard of that one actually. So I'm not surprised that it finished so low because it really didn't get a lot of buzz from what I've heard. But I am curious in terms of seeing what people think about it. It's a sweeping novel inspired by the untold history of women pioneers who fought to protect children caught in the storm of land barons hungry for power and oil wealth, Oklahoma of 1909. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's written from the perspective of, let's see, 11-year-old Olive Augusta Radley. And then it jumps to Oklahoma of 1990. Yeah, I'll look into that one a little bit more before I add it to my TBR, but it does seem interesting to in terms of historical fiction. But I'll look into that one a little bit more. Not much else for me to say about this respective category. I am glad that the Seventh Veil of Salome made it to the second round, but unfortunately it didn't finish higher than what it did. I am planning on reading that in full, and I am planning on reading on several of the top books in the historical fiction category, including the women. I am not surprised to see Kristen Hanna's name here and the overwhelming amount of votes that are for that respective story, especially since I've heard so many people in my reading circles who have told me, Rose, pick up this book. Same thing with James. So definitely those two are going to be on my priority list to be able to pick up as well. And I'll see about some of the other ones to be able to do. So let's move on to mystery and thriller, which is the next category. I'm going to try to pick up my pace a little bit going through this. So this is one that very much surprised me for mystery and thriller. It was Liz Moore's The God of the Woods. I did not anticipate this winning at all. And so I kind of suspect that what happened here was that there was quite a bit of vote splitting, especially since there was either one author or a couple of authors who had multiple nominations in this one, so we'll go through it. But Reader's Favorite Mystery and Thriller won with 82,603 votes. I am also surprised that First Lie Wins got as high as it did by Ashley Elston, and it finished up in second place with 74,753 votes. I wasn't interested in reading that to start with, I think. I may look into that a little bit more to be able to see what people thought of it, but I'll do my research for that like a little bit more before I even put that on my TBR. But in terms of all the nominees, that the total amount of votes, it was 571,747 votes total. So that's interesting in terms of how many people voted in this respective category compared to the previous categories. So let me go back briefly in terms of, yeah. So that it was a lot more than this one. And then for fiction, yeah, it was more than it. So mystery and thriller got more overall votes than historical fiction or fiction. So that's interesting to see. That's interesting to see. All right, so let's go through each of these. As I mentioned, God of the Woods by Liz Moore won first place. First Lie Wins got second place. And this is where I say that there were some vote splitting definitely going on with these two Frida McFadden titles. The Boyfriend got more votes than The Teacher. So here's an interesting thing that I'll make a note of, because at the time of the recording last time, you may recall that I voted for The Teacher by Frida McFadden before I had read it, because I had heard good things about it. But I actually did end up reading The Teacher. I did not like it. I did not like it at all. So I actually did change my vote close to when the polling had closed, because I did not feel confident enough to be able to vote for The Teacher, because I was like, yeah, I did not care for this respective mystery. The Teacher was how do I even like, where do I even begin with it? It's basically the story of a woman who is in a troubled marriage that is on the downside. Her husband seems to be the perfect, like, they both teach at the same school, but they teach different subjects, and the main character of The Teacher is a math teacher, while her husband is a very beloved English teacher, and they end up at this respective school. There was a scandal with respect to a student who was involved of the with the firing of another teacher because of a scandal. And this same student, who is an alternate perspective in The Teacher, ends up being a student for the respective main female character, as well as her husband, and a lot of drama unfolds. I'm not going to get into too much more other than that basic premise for describing The Teacher in this video. I'll have a whole reflection in a review for one of my reading wrap-ups, but I did not care for The Teacher for what it chose to do with several reveals. It had my attention, but the execution of it and asking me to suspend disbelief on so many things, and just so many plot elements that I did not like about it, left a bad taste in my mouth. So I said, like, I was not going to vote for it ultimately in the Goodreads Choice Awards. I'm not surprised, because of the popularity of Frida McFadden, that it ended up being in fourth place. I have not read The Boyfriend yet. That is on my, I was able to pick up a copy from my library, so I am going to read The Boyfriend as soon as I possibly can and reflect on that, but I told myself the teacher was not it was not good to me, unfortunately. I understand the appeal of it, but that for the execution of it and the elements within it, I did not care for it. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. I am planning on reading The Boyfriend. I'm not surprised that Freedom McFadden took both third place with 57,069 votes and 56,944 votes for fourth place for the teacher. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about the teacher. I want to go into it, but I'm not going to do it for this video because that would be a video in and of itself. We'll get there. We'll get there. So for the next set of winners, for fifth through eighth place, All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker got 50,047 votes. That's actually a pretty close vote total. Well, not that close. It's like 6,000 different votes, but it relatively like this one isn't as clear of a runaway between the third and the fifth books in terms of things. It's Runaway with God of the Woods and First Lie Wins. But again, I think Freedom McFadden being nominated twice split the vote for both of these. I really do think that Goodreads needs to limit like an author being nominated for the same category in terms of things so that this vote splitting doesn't happen. It happened in romance before with respect to Colleen Hoover, if I remember correctly, for one of the previous years. And I don't think she should have been nominated for multiple books in the same category either. I think there should be um, uh, there should be rules put in place to prevent that from happening so that it gives other people not only the chance to be able to potentially win things, but also in terms of preventing that whole vote splitting thing. So yeah, that's just my thought about it. But we'll keep going. So the next, the sixth place winner is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I've heard quite a bit about that. At this point, it got 47,313 votes. I am planning on reading that. Richard Osman, We Solve Murders, got 43,327 votes. I'm not surprised with considering how popular Richard Osman is. I am planning on reading that as well. I talked about Geneva Rose in my previous video. I am planning on reading Home is Where the Bodies Are. That got 8th place with 34,554 votes. We can keep it moving. Not much to say about that. And then Lucy Foley's The Midnight Feast. I am very surprised that Lucy Foley, I'm guessing by name recognition, Lucy Foley is getting quite a bit of votes, but my experience with Lucy Foley hasn't been great so far. But I guess I can kind of see why people gravitate to that author, but not my cup of tea. It got ninth place with 30,672 votes. I'm not really interested in reading The Midnight Feast. I'll probably look and see what other people say about it, but it's probably not one that I'm going to add to my TBR. Just because of my previous experiences with Lucy Foley. I don't know if I've given a reflection on any of Lucy Foley's books on the channel before, but I'll probably put that as a priority, put a pin in it to be able to reflect on what I've read from Lucy Foley before. So I'll put a pin in it and talk about it later. And then in 10th place with 29,969 votes is How to Solve Your Own Murder. And I added that to my TBR. I do hope to be able to get to that as soon as I possibly can. I've heard good things about it. So, and I'm not surprised that it did as well as it did. And now we're going to get into the books that didn't make it past the first round. So we're going to start with Riley Sager, who I'm very surprised Riley Sager did not, considering name recognition, that Riley did not make it past the first round. I haven't heard much about Middle of the Night to be able to reflect on it, but let's see what it's about. I've heard Riley Sager is very hit and miss. Let's see, and I've read from Riley Sager before, but I don't think I've reviewed um Sager's work on the channel before. I do want to remedy that though. Let's see, man must contend with the long ago disappearance of his childhood best friend. Interesting. I will research that and kind of like dive into whether or not I'm going to add that to my TBR or not. If you have read it, what do you think about it? I've heard like every book that Riley Sager has written has been either hit or miss, which makes me hesitant to try certain books by the author, but we'll see. We'll see. That got 11,836 votes. Then following that with 11,798 votes is The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. I've heard of Nita Prose before. This one is the second book in its respective series. I have not read all of the first book in its respective series, so that's one of the reasons why it's not on my TBR. But I do plan on reading the first one in this. What was the first name of the first book in this respective series? Let me take a look and see. Just to clarify, it is, yeah, part of the Molly the Maid series. The first one was The Maid. Yeah, The Maid. So I did start. I have not finished The Maid yet, but that is one I am planning on finishing and giving my thoughts about before I even touch The Mystery Guest. So we'll keep it moving. Sally Hepworth. I have definitely heard of Sally Hepworth before. I have not heard much about Darling Girls. That got 9,509 votes. I am planning on reading that. That is on my TBR. Then following that is The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins, who I am very familiar with. 7,700 7,778 votes. I've heard mixed opinions about The Heiress, but I am planning on reading it, so we'll leave it at that. And then following that is the last one, At the Wedding by Jason Rukulak. I am not interested in reading Jason Rukulak's work. I'm just going to leave it at that. That got the following place with 5,189 votes. And then after that was The Night We Lost Him by Laura Dave, which, interestingly enough, I loved the last thing he told me, which is what I have read from Laura Dave before, and that was one of my top picks. And I think it actually did win the Goodreads Choice Award for its respective year, if I remember correctly. But I have not read The Night We Lost Him. I'm surprised that for as well as the last thing he told me, um, how that did, that The Night We Lost Him didn't do as well. But I haven't heard much about this respective book to be able to see how people received this follow-up book. So it is on my TBR. I am looking forward to reading it. I'm not sure when I'll be able to get to it, but I do plan on reading it. And I am surprised that it didn't do better than what it did. But yeah. You could also argue the same thing about Jason Rukulak, since Jason Rukulak won his respective category. Um, and I think Jason Rukulak was nominated for horror, if I remember correctly, and actually like surprised a lot of people and just won a lot of people as well, considering the other book that he was nominated for. But um, I am surprised that as well as that particular book that he didn't do better in this respective category, but it really just depends. But I'm not interested in reading the last one of The Wedding. I am interested in reading The Night We Lost Him, just because I have had a positive experience with Laura Dave's work before. So I'll leave it at that. And then we're coming up on the last set of people in this category. The Return of Ellie Black by Miko Jean Got 4,770 votes. I have that already on my TBR. That was one that I was interested in being able to read, about our disappearance in the woods of Washington State. Yep, I remember this one in terms of things. So I am planning on reading that. I'm not sure when I'll be able to get to about. I'm thinking about holding that on reserve at my library to be able to pick that up as soon as I can. So moving on is following that respective finish, which is part of Reese's book club, is Society of Lies by Laura Lane Brown. That is also on my TBR. It got 3,691 votes. House of Glass by Sarah Pekkanen. I am very familiar with Sarah Pekkanen in terms of things. I'm kind of surprised that in terms of name recognition alone that Sarah did not do better in this category, but I haven't heard too much about House of Glass, and I'm not surprised that it got 3,505 votes here because I have not heard much about in terms of things. I'm surprised it didn't go higher because of name recognition, but I haven't heard much about the book. So I'll leave it at that. And then in last place is Not What She Seems by Yasmin Ngowe. See, I haven't heard much about this respective book, but it's this one that I want to read. Let's see. Yeah, I would read this. I would read this. I just haven't heard much about it. So it is on my reading list now. Those are my respective reflections for this respective category. And I am planning on reading The God of the Woods. I've heard mixed opinions about The God of the Woods, but I do think that this one, I think the results of this would have gone very differently if it weren't for multiple people being nominated in the same category. So I'll leave it at that. And if you've read The God of the Woods, what did you think of it? That's something that I'm interested in hearing more from people in terms of what they thought of that respective book. I do plan on reading it though. So let's go ahead and move on to romance next. All right, took a very brief break before I went into the next category, which is reader's favorite romance. So we're going to just go ahead and dive in. This one has definitely the most vote total, so you can tell how many romance readers there are who were insistent upon voting for this category, and they voted overwhelmingly for Funny Story by Emily Henry, which got 179,349 votes. I am not surprised at this result. I actually predicted that Emily Henry would take it. Emily Henry tends to be hit or miss with me. I really enjoyed Book Lovers. I was kind of iffy about Happy Place. I'm still kind of like on the fence about people who we meet on vacation, which I do need to write a review for and reflect on the channel at some point, and also on my blog to write a full review of it, but I'll get to that when I get to it. I have not read Funny Story yet. I think Funny Story is technically a St. Mark's Press title, which I'm still technically on boycott about. I can at least mention the title in terms of things, and it isn't in my collection because I pre-ordered it before the boycott was announced. But I'm not sure when I'll be able to pick this one up yet, quite yet, because I'm still participating in that boycott, technically speaking. So I'll leave it at that and keep it moving. But it is in my collection. I do plan on reading it eventually. I just don't know when that will be. Let's look at some of the other runners up. It really is interesting in terms of the gap between Emily Henry's Funny Story and Abby Jimenez's Just for the Summer, which is a book I've heard a lot of good things about. It was a Good Morning America pick as well. And of course, like so many people have talked about Abby Jimenez's on other works, including Part of Your World, is another popular book by the same author. It's interesting that Emily Henry got 179,349 votes, and Abby Jimenez was right at the top with 140,786 votes in second place. Am I surprised to see these two in the top two? No, I'm not at all. And I do have both Emily Henry's book as well as Abby Jimenez's book on my TBR. Allie Hazelwood, I am not surprised to see in third place with 99,290 votes, but I've heard very mixed opinions about Bride. I was able to pick up Bride because it was on sale, so I am planning on reading it. I'm not 100% sure when I'll be able to get to it, though, in terms of being able to reflect on it. So that's our top three right here. They had a lot of vote totals, and you can see the very steep drop off between the top three as in comparison to what finished up in fourth place, which is Leather and Lark by Bryn Weaver. This is part of a series, the Ruinous Love Trilogy. I have not even read the first book, so that is not on my TBR. I've heard mixed opinions about it from people who have read from that particular series. I'm not sure if or when I'm going to be able to pick that up, but that's like I'm not surprised to see it finishing it as high as it is based on people talking about it and what I've been able to learn about it since. But yeah, I am interested. It is interesting to see the drop off in votes between the first three, the top three, and the fourth place winner. So just FYI. Moving right along, I am very surprised that Liz Tom Ford finished as high as she did. I'm not interested in reading to Liz Tom Ford. I'll just better to leave that where it is. But it did get 40,988 votes. I am surprised that Anna Huang didn't beat out Liz Tom Ford, which King of Sloth, which is part of a series, and I think it's the fourth book in a respective series. Is Play Along a part of a series? I think it is, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure because I don't follow the author, but still. Anna Huang is King of Sloth, finished up in sixth place with 39,476 votes. Since I have not read that respective series, it's not on my TBR. Wild Love by Elsie Silver got in seventh place with 34,992 votes. Wild Love is also part of a series. Yeah, it's the first part. It's the first book in a series, actually. Is this one that I want to try to read? Is the question. Hmm. Hmm. I am going to research that one. Yeah, I'd rather hear about it from other people in terms of gauging whether or not that's one I'm going to pick up. So I'll wait on that one. I remember commenting about the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore in my previous video. It's interesting that it finished up in eighth place with 33,652 votes. That is the second book in the series, so I will not add that to my TBR. I'll look into the first book and then I'll decide whether or not to add it to my TBR. Yeah, the first one I think is called the first one in the book that respective series is called Pumpkin Spice Cafe. So yeah, and then rounding off the top 10. Of course, the one that I voted for this summer will be different, by Carly Fortune ended up in 10th place, but right before it is Christina Lauren's The Paradise Problem, which I have not heard too much about. So The Paradise Problem ended up with 32,715 votes. The summer will be different had in 10th place 29,357 votes. So that tells you in terms of what the top 10 looks like for that. And then getting into the books that did not make it past the first round. So, Casey McQuiston's The Pairing. That was the book that was involved in a very controversial book box release. Yes, it got 11,640 votes. Um, I haven't heard too much about that respective book. I've read from Casey McQuiston before. I have not read that particular book. In terms of things, I have not heard too much about that book. Um, Respectively, it may be one that I add to my TBR eventually, but I'm not 100% sure if I will quite yet. So I'm just gonna hold off on that one and do a little bit of research and see if it's something that I want to pick up or not. Not much really to say about it. And then Hannah Grace, I am familiar with Hannah Grace's work. Same author as Icebreaker. This is part of a series. This is Daydream. It got 11,560 votes. I'm surprised it didn't finish higher, but it may be because it is a part of a series and it's later down the line. So that might factor into it. I don't know if that's one that I'm going to pick up quite yet. I have not read Icebreaker, so I wouldn't know respectively in terms of what that series entails. But I do think I will try to see if I can read Icebreaker, and then that'll determine whether or not I pick up more books by Hannah Grace. So I'll put a pin in it and see. And then Catherine Center, I am familiar with. Catherine Center is the author of The Bodyguard, among other books in terms of things. The Rom-Commers, I haven't heard too much in terms of feedback about that, but that got 10,607 votes, which is pretty decent in terms of the vote total. It just didn't make it past the first round. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't really have much to say about the rom-commers because I don't know too much about how people have received it, but it is on my TBR to be able to read and pick up for myself. And then there's Allie Hazelwood's Not in Love. So Allie Hazelwood was nominated for multiple books in this category, which y'all know how I feel based on my spiel from earlier. I don't think that multiple books by the same author should be nominated in the same category. I just because there's so much in the way of vote splitting, and it doesn't give enough. It doesn't give other authors the opportunity to be able to be nominated as well. But this got 10,380 votes. It didn't make it past the first round, whereas Bride did, and Bride ended up getting third place, as you can see up here, and by much more votes in terms of things. So I'm wondering if Not in Love just wasn't as well received, or if Bride appealed more. I don't know because I haven't read really much from Allie Hazelwood to be able to to gauge that. So I don't know, but I'll leave it at that. And it got 10,380 votes, as I mentioned before. And then the steep drop off in terms of votes. This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan, which I really enjoyed. It was one of my favorite reads from this past year. The fact that it did not get past the first round kind of bums me out because it was very well written, had a lot to say, like in terms of being able to showcase Soledad's story. And actually, This Could Be Us was my favorite of the respective series. It is the second in the Skyland trilogy. I actually like this book in the respective series more than the first one. I gave this one, I think, either 4.5 out of 5 stars or 5 stars because I thought it was very well done and sold out story was very well done in terms of being able to showcase her respective experience. I'm not gonna get too much into it because that I did a review of This Could Be Us on my channel earlier. I will link that respective review up in the cards and in the description down below for your reference. But I really enjoyed that book. I hate the fact that it did not get past the first round, and I'll just leave it at that. It got 7,742 votes, so. And then following that was Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. That one I have not heard anything about. It is the second in a series, apparently. Mm, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna do a little bit of research of that more before I add it to my TBR, but I have not heard of that respective book to be able to reflect anything about it. But it got 6,751 votes. So my choice for this category, which was one of my favorite reads of this year, only got romance reads of this year, only got 6,038 votes. A Love Song for Ricky Wilde was a wonderful book by Tia Williams, and I would argue that it's the book that I loved the most from among Tia Williams's work thus far. I love it more than 7 Days in June. I love it more than A Perfect Find. It was just very, very well done for showing the chemistry between the leads. And Ricky was such a wonderful character to be able to follow. Like, it's an interesting take in terms of being able to see the relationship of two people spanning across the years with a bit of a twist, which I'm not going to get into for the sake of this video. But it was one of my favorite reads this year, and I'm so bummed out that it did not do better in the Goodreads Choice Awards. I have very specific thoughts in terms of why it may not have the platform that it has in terms of things, but I don't feel like going on a respective rant about it. I just don't think that, like, collectively speaking, the Goodreads Choice Awards has been good in terms of being able to showcase a range of romances, especially romances that are by marginalized authors in terms of things, and it's disappointing to say the least. And I don't know what the solution of that would be in terms of things because this is a popularity contest. And you can even see, like, in terms of like the amount of people who have voted for it. So romance is a very popular category, but it's really some of the same names taking the top spots, and really you don't see some of the other work, some of the wonderful and beautiful work that other people have done, especially those in marginalized communities uh, that have been able to do it, and like not being able to showcase, their stellar work. It just, yeah, I'm disappointed to say the least, but yeah. The less I say about that, the better for right now. I'll put a pin in it in terms of if there's a video that I want to make in terms of delving deeper into that subject matter, then I will, but not for this respective reaction video. Let's move on to the next follow-up, the last three spots of the romance category that didn't make it past the first round. There was How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwang, which got 5,856 votes and was a Reese's book club pick. That one, I'm not sure if this was one that I missed. Uh, Putting on my TBR, let's see. I may have just missed it. Okay. You know what? I'll try it. I'll try it. Let's add it to my TBR. Yep. Just based on the premise. And then following that is The Love of My Afterlife by Christy Greenwood. That one I have not heard too much about. That got into next to last place with 5,488 votes. I haven't heard too much about this one either, though it was a Good Morning America pick. And it's got quite a bit of ratings. It's got a 4.10 average rating. Okay. Yeah, I'll read it. I'll read it. And then the last place was Kevin Kwan's Lies and Weddings. Kevin Kwan is the author of um, Kevin Kwan is the author of Crazy Rich Asians, which has been nominated, which has gotten a lot of attention based on that respective trilogy, and in terms of like the showcasing the story of the characters there. Very popular movie as well. I don't know if Lies and Weddings counts as a romance. I have not read it. I don't know how it ends. I don't know how um it's classified in terms of whether or not it fits the romance category. It was nominated, but I haven't heard much about it in terms of people reflecting about it to be able to gauge whether or not it should have even been in this category. But it got last place with 4,979 votes. So I'm not surprised that they got last place just for the fact that I don't know if categorically it fits compared to several of the other titles that are in this respective category. But yeah, and is this part of a series? It doesn't seem, it seems like it's a standalone based on this. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm going to research that a little bit more before I add it to my TBR though. Really not much more that I can add to this respective category. I am disappointed to see the lack of range and seeing some of my favorite titles of the year just did not even make it past the first round, or and even just getting as low of vote totals as they did, especially with a lot of the buzz that was surrounding This Could Be Us, as well as a love song for Ricky Wilde. I feel like they should have done a lot better. I really do. I am not surprised that Emily Henry took it, though, in terms of things, especially considering Emily Henry tends to appeal to both romance readers as well as like kind of literary romance readers, and also the appeal of the audiobook as well, and which is read by Julia Whalen, which I'll get to my reflections on Julia Whalen a little bit later in this, because you'll see like when I talk about it, but I'll put a pin in it and just move on to Romantasy. I was definitely not surprised to see who won Romantasy, as you'll see when it pulls up. So the winner of Romantasy, which I don't think most people are surprised by, is Sarah J. Maas, House of Flame and Shadow. Now, whether or not it actually like deserved to win, I don't know, especially since a lot of people had mixed opinions about this respective installation um, in that respective series by Sarah J. Maas. Let's see, the Crescent City series. So I it's obviously not on my TBR because I haven't even read the first one, and I'm not sure if I really want to read that respective series because I've heard very mixed opinions about it. It probably would not be my cup of tea. I don't know, like I'll put a pin in it to see like if it is something that I would want to try, but more likely probably not. I am very surprised. I am not surprised that it was a runaway win by Sarah J. Maas with 122,895 votes. I am surprised at the lower total for Romantasy in terms of things compared to romance. Um, like it's 499,305 votes total, but that drop off between Sarah J. Maas and then the next uh the second place winner, A Princess to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Maher, got 56,345 votes. I have not heard great things about Apprentice to the Villain. I know it's the second to second book to the first book in that respective series, which is Assistant to the Villain. But I've heard so many mixed opinions about it. So for it to do as well as it did, I'm kind of surprised that it got second place. Since I have not read the first one, it is on my TBR. So that's all I can really say about it. Third book that won the third place finish in the Romantasy category was Quicksilver by Callie Hart. 49,930 votes. I did put that on my TBR to read. And then that is followed by When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. 48,611 votes. I am very happy that The Spell Shop got fifth place by Sarah Beth Drifters. I started reading The Spell Shop, but I have not finished it at the time of the recording of this video. But was able to start it. So I did say that like I would pick it up and try to see if I could finish it before filming the winners of the Goodreads Choice Awards. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish it before the filming of this video. But I am in the process of reading it and I enjoy it quite a bit, and as I expected I would. And as I mentioned before, Sarah, I love Sarah Durst. I'm very happy that she was able to get fifth place with 39,760 votes. And I have heard a lot of like some of my peers who have also enjoyed the Spell Shop for what it offered in terms of things. So happy about that. Happy about that. Um, in the sixth place is A Fate Inked in Blood by Daniel L. Jensen, 35,858 votes. That is the first in a series, I believe. Yeah, Saga of the Unfated, and I did put that on my TBR to be able to pick up at some point. Moving right along with seventh place is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. That is 32,174 votes. I've heard mixed opinions about Phantasma. I can't really speak to it in terms of things. It's the first in the series, yes. It's the first in the Wicked Game series, but I've heard mixed opinions about it. I can't speak to it though. I don't know if I'm going to be able. I don't know if I'm going to pick that one up based on what I've heard of it. But moving on, Zodiac Academy. I've heard that book was actually over 1,000 pages. I'm very surprised that Zodiac Academy, especially with it being the ninth book in a series, this is Restless Stars, that it got 22,647 votes. But, it's a popular series. I've heard not great things about it. I'm unlikely to pick up that respective series based on what I've heard of it. I was just like, yeah, it's not my cup of tea. It got eighth place with 22,647 votes. So moving on, I am not surprised to see Jennifer L. Armentrout here with ninth place, 19,586 votes. Let's see, Born of Blood and Ash is the fourth book in the Flesh and Fire series. Yeah, so it's not my TBR. And then rounding out the top 10 with The Touch of Chaos by Scarlett St. Clair is 18,975 votes for 10th place. So I'm not surprised at Scarlett St. Clair being here either in terms of the top 10. But yeah. And A Touch of Chaos is the fourth book in the Hades and Persephone saga, so it's down the line in terms of the numbering of the series. So you can see kind of a pattern with some of the later books in some of these series finishing lower, but that did not stop Sarah J. Maas at all. Even with it being the third book in the Crescent City series, she still took it in terms of things. But yeah, not much that I can really add to that. I am going to continue on with naming the rest of the runners up that didn't make it past the first round. First, we're going to start with number 11, which was Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. 7,790 votes. It didn't really get many compared to Scarlet St. Clair, obviously. You can see where the dip happens. I can't tell you much about this book because I have not heard of it. Is this one that I want to read? It seems like something that I would read. I do like the cover of it. All right, let's go for it. Let's go for it. But I have not heard of it. And then there's Faybound. Faybound, I have an advanced reader copy of. I have been wanting to read this book in full by Sarah El Arafi. Is first book in a respective series. I'm interested in it, and I did vote for it hoping it would make it past the first round, but obviously it did not. It got 7,648 votes. I am very surprised that it got so low on here, but maybe it was more fantasy than fantasy, romantasy. I wonder. I don't know. It may be one of those things where it's like this book did not fit this respective category as well as it was nominated for. I don't know. But that is one that I want to be able to read in full and give my thoughts about. So it is on my TBR. I did vote for it. Unfortunately, it didn't make it past the first round, but it is what it is. That's all I can really say. See, moving right along. Let's see. Allison Saf's Dark and Drowning Tide followed up with 7,246 votes. How close is that? Yeah, like mm, not quite 400 votes. Yeah, that's interesting in terms of how close that was. And then Blood of Hercules, which I've heard mixed opinions about Blood of Hercules enough to say I don't really want to read that respective book based on what I've heard of it so far by Jasmine Moss. I did hear that it had a seven-figure deal. I heard people did have it had a lot of buzz behind it. It only got 6,264 votes here. So I don't know how that translates in terms of how popular it is, because what I've heard of it, it is romantasy and is the first in a respective series, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Villains of Lore, but I'm not interested in reading it. I'll leave it alone. That's all. That's all I have to say about it. Just my preference in terms of things, and based on what I've heard about it so far. So yeah, it's not my cup of tea. Next, in terms of the runners up, is with 6,117 votes, Abigail Owens' Games God's Play. That one I have not heard much about. Percy Jackson for Adults meets The Hunger Games with a slow burn romance between a contestant and Hades himself. Okay, so I'm gonna research that one before, or I would add it to my TBR. I do like the cover, and it does sound interesting, at least from the premise, but I do want to do a little bit more research in terms of things for what impact it has to what people are saying about it. So I'll leave it at that. And then following that with 5,617 votes is by Raven Kennedy. Raven Kennedy I am familiar with. This is part of the Plated Prisoner series, and this is gold. This is not on my TBR only because I have not read the first books in this respective series, so I can't speak to it. But it may be one that because I am familiar with Raven Kennedy's work, I may try to see if I can start that respective series and get my thoughts about the first book in that respective series. So I'll put a pin in it for that. Rounding out the final four, The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee, 3,388 votes. First book in The Veiled Kingdom. I will do some research on that one, see what people say about it. And then following that is A Crown This Cold and Heavy by Stacia Stark, 3,168 votes. That's another one I'll have to do research on. Fate of the Sun King follows that with 2,882 votes by Nisha J. Tully. And then last place is with 2,404 votes is A Promise of Peridot by Kate Golden. I do like the cover of that one. It is the second book in a respective series called Sacred Stones. I have not read the first book, so I can't. I don't have that on my TBR, but I'll look into it a little bit more. Yeah, there's not much I can really say about Romantasy, to be honest with you. I do want to read more from this respective category. Contrary to what people have said about it, it's not really a new category because it used to be called fantasy romance, and I feel like a lot of fantasy romance authors coming before Sarah J. Maas really aren't getting the credit that they deserve to be getting for this respective category because of certain things in terms of reclassifying it and trying to make something that was already existence into a rebranding of things. But that's another rant video in the making in terms of things, and I'd rather not go into it in this respective video, but I'm not surprised Sarah J. Maas took it for this, and I even more I'm convinced that Romantasy as a category was created for the Goodreads Choice Awards to separate Romantasy from other fantasy titles. But yeah, let's move on to fantasy. All right, so for readers' favorite fantasy, I was disappointed in this one. I'm not surprised that TJ Klune won, but I am disappointed. It won with 69,854 votes. The total number of votes in this category was 413,715. I am very surprised how close that vote total was between TJ Klune and Lee Bardugo. I would have thought that Lee Bardugo would have won this one based on name recognition in terms of the familiar, though I've heard mixed opinions about the familiar in terms of how people receive that in terms of things. That is a very close vote total, though, in terms of things. Lee Bardugo got 68,564 votes for second place. And then rounding out the top four, Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which is the second in the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett, got third place. I have not read the first book in that respective series, so I can't speak to it. It's not on my TBR, but if I do get the opportunity to be able to read the first book in that respective series, then I will, and then I'll see if I can pick that one up. Number four, Book of Doors, that ended up getting fourth place from Gareth Brown with 33,455 votes. It's a big drop off in terms of the total between the first two and the third and fourth place votes. So that's interesting in terms of how that worked out. Jay Kristoff got 28,376 votes. I'm not surprised to see him on the top 10. I'm not interested in Empire of the Damned, though. Five Broken Blades by Maya Corland got 28,356 votes. That is a very close vote total, though, between these two. It's only like, whew, 20 votes. Wow. I am just noticing that. Wow, that was a close vote. So Five Broken Blades technically could have overtaken Empire of the Damned in terms of how close that vote is. So every vote counts, I guess. I didn't know it was that close, and I'm just noticing that now. Like when I was looking at the winners before, and when I did my previous video, I had just noted the fact that these two had like finished in their respective places, but I did not make a note of how close that vote total was. So that's really interesting. Very, very interesting. Again, every vote counts. Yeah. Moving right along with seventh place is The Fox Wife by Yangzi Chu with 21,029 votes. That is one that I want to read as well. And Five Broken Blades is obviously one that I want to be able to read too. I really like the premise for both of these. And then The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. Again, I mentioned that Meg Schaefer is the pen name of Tiffany Rice. I'm not surprised that it did as well as it did here with 20,328 votes to bring it in eighth place. But yeah, moving right along, not much to say about it, but it is on my TBR to be able to pick up and read. The ninth place is, with 19,218 votes is The Tainted Cup, which is the first book in the Shadow of the Leviathan by Robert Jackson Bennett. I put that on my TBR. I am interested in reading that. And then rounding out the top 10 is Deborah Harkness's The Blackbird Oracle, and that's part of the All Souls series. I'm not surprised that they got top 10 with 18,784 votes to put it in the 10th place finish. Now I'm going to get to the books that did not make it past the first round. So Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. I've talked about Alexis Henderson on the channel before. I've heard that an Academy for Liars is her contribution to the dark academia uh theme in terms of things. I've heard mixed opinions about it. I am planning on reading it, but I know I don't have very high expectations of it because a lot of trusted readers that who have talked about it with me said that, like, it's hit and miss in terms of its execution for certain things, but I am still planning on reading it, and I'm looking forward to being able to give my thoughts about it. But it got 11th place with 8,243 votes. And then following that is The Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. Why is this not on my TBR? This is Kingfisher, who I do adore. A dark retelling of the Brothers Grimm Goose Girl. Oh, I'm definitely adding that right now. So that's new to me in terms of things. Adding that right now to my TBR. I'm definitely looking forward to being able to read it though. Let's see, and it finished in 12th place with 8,073 votes behind an Academy for Liars. Moving right along is A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang, 7,438 votes. This is a Good Morning America book club pick, so I'm not surprised that it was nominated, but it didn't make it past the first round. I will add that to my TBR though. And moving right along is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. 6,222 votes. Speculative twist of a historical novel. Same author as The Bear and the Nightingale. I'm going to research that one a little bit more before I decide to pick that one up. And then following that is One Among Crows by Veronica Roth. I'm not interested in reading Veronica Roth. I've had too many negative experiences in terms of picking up her work, so it's not my cup of tea. But it's the first of one of her series called Curse Bearer. It finished up after The Warm Hands of Ghost with 5,726 votes. And then following that is with 4,747 votes is The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song, fused with magic and romance, sweeping fantasy adventure inspired by the legend Mulan, follows a young woman determined to choose her own destiny. Interesting. I am kind of surprised that with a premise like this that it didn't finish higher. I'll put it on my reading list. That's one that I do want to read. So Leave Grossman's The Bright Sword uh, finished up next with 4,282 votes. Okay. I'll look into that a little bit more. Grossman is the one who's written the Magician's trilogy. Following that is Voyage of the Damned. I am very familiar with Voyage of the Damned. I've at least started that book. I have not finished that book. I am very surprised that it got as low as it did in this respective category with 4,180 votes. I would have thought that it would have finished higher considering the buzz about it in terms of things, especially compared to some of these other titles. But it only has 7,809 ratings on Goodreads. So it's interesting in terms of in terms of like it was mentioned a lot for TikTok. It did not translate to the number of votes that were in this respective category. So I wonder about that too. But I am looking forward to being able to finish that up and give my thoughts about it. And I've enjoyed it so far. I've enjoyed it so far. The other book that, and again, I'm very disappointed in terms of how few people have recognized P. Djeli Clark's work in terms of things, but the Dead Cat Tail Assassins, it feels like it should have finished way higher than what it did with 3,635 votes. And I've started reading the Dead Cat Tail Assassins. I have not finished that, but I do plan on reviewing it for the channel, and I enjoy it so far. I just that bums me out. I was so disappointed when I saw that. I was like, it didn't make it past the first round, and it had such a low vote total. It deserves so much more love. It deserves so much more love and much more attention than it gets. So I'm definitely planning on reviewing that in full and giving my thoughts about it on the channel in terms of talking about it, and definitely giving it more love than the Goodreads Choice Awards gave it. Unfortunately. Moving right along to the last place spot with 3,048 votes is A Sweet Sting of Salt by Rose Sutherland. This one I'm not 100% sure what this one is about. So it looks like this is a queer reimagining of the classic folktale The Selkie Wife. Oh, that's interesting. That would be something that I want to read. So I'll add that to my TBR. I haven't heard much about this respective book, but I do want to be able to give it a chance and give my thoughts about it. So I'll add it to my TBR. Not much else that I can say about this respective category. Um, I really am kind of disappointed in terms of the selection for reader's favorite fantasy in terms of things like there are some titles here that I think deserve much more love than they got. And then there are other fantasy titles that I think didn't even make the nomination for this year that really should have been in this respective category in terms of things. I may do a separate video for that in terms of things that were released this year that I think could have easily been nominated in this respective category, but I'll put a pin in it. But I do think someone else other than TJ Klune should have won this category in terms of things. But I recognize that TJ Klune is a popular author. Not my his work is not my cup of tea, and I'm just gonna leave it at that without going into too much about it. But yeah. Like I think someone else could have won this. Like in terms of things, there are other fantasy titles that I think should have been nominated, like in this respective category, and have got and should have gotten more love than what they did. But I'll keep it going. Let's move on to science fiction. Okay, so I've heard a number of different people who have said that The Ministry of Time was a book that they liked and that they would not be surprised if this won the Goodreads Choice Award, and it did win with 78,459 votes. I am going to end up reading this. Let me go ahead and add that to my TBR right now. I am surprised by the lower overall vote total compared to the other categories, though. This only got 277,310 votes total. And of those, the top one was the Ministry of Time. That is interesting that John Mars, who I had talked about in the previous video in terms of that particular premise intriguing me, got second place with respect to this with 34,821 votes for the family experiment. Third place was Antibot. That's one that I want to read as well. 30,208 votes. So big gap between the first and second, but not too big of a gap between the second and third. I am very surprised that The Mercy of Gods did not get higher in terms of the vote total, but I've heard that people have mixed opinions about The Mercy of God. So, but it still managed to make fourth place with 17,516 votes. So that's interesting. To be able to see the vote total in terms of the drop-offs between first and second, and then third and fourth for that. I would have thought that James S.A. Corey would have done better than what he did, but it may be the nature of that particular book, and then also the fact that I think in terms of the nominations for respective books in science fiction, a lot of these are literary science fiction, and there are a lot of nominees, not a lot of books that weren't nominated that I feel like could have fit in this category but weren't recognized this year by Goodreads. But yeah, it's unfortunate, but I do plan on reading all of the top four books in this category in terms of things they are on my TBR to be able to read. Moving right along. In terms of the fifth through eighth place, Orbital by Samantha Harvey got fifth place. And that was the one about the astronauts. I have not read it, but it is on my TBR. It got 16,487 votes. So yeah. And then the Stardust Grail by Yumi Katase got 14,098 votes. That is on my TBR. Seventh place with 13,326 votes was Douglas Preston, which is Extinction. I told myself that I was going to look into that more before I picked it up to be able to see what people thought about it. And then Moon of the Turning Leaves got eighth place with 12,860 votes. That was actually my vote. I think that was one of my vote choices. And I did end up, yeah, I did end up voting that one, but it only got eighth place. I do plan on reading that and giving my thoughts about it. I have not picked it up yet. I did reserve it on my uh for my library holds, and this was the second in its respective series. I have the first book on my TBR, and I have the second book on my TBR, and both of them are on reserve for my library, but I have not picked them up yet. So yeah. Moving right along, I Cheerfully Refuse by Leaf Inger. 11,757 votes. That was came in ninth place. And then the last place was The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard, 11,322 votes. That's on my TBR as well. And then very steep drop off, as you can see, like in terms of the vote total between the first, the finalists and the picks that did not make it past the first round. Beautyland, who's this by? Marie-Helene Bertino. This one I have not heard of. Tender novel about a woman who doesn't feel at home on Earth. Space. Interesting. Um, I haven't heard too much about that. I'm gonna probably research it a little bit more, see what people say about it, and then I'll add it to my TBR if I want to pick it up. That only got 4,811 votes. And then Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. I am very surprised Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer, by name recognition alone, didn't do higher, but it may be the fact that this particular book may not have fit its respective category. Also, the fact that it is the fourth book in its respective series. So that might also be the other part of it. Like I've heard different things about it in terms of like whether or not it should have been nominated, but I'm not 100% sure. It is part of a respective series. I do plan on picking it up when I get the opportunity to do so, but yeah, I can't speak to it. It got 4,659 votes, so moving right along. Jasper Ford's Red Side Story, 4,637 votes. Okay. I've not read the first book in that respective series. Um, this Black Box of Doom. Oh, I'm starting to worry about this Black Box of Doom. That's a very interesting title by Jason Pargin. Standalone darkly humorous thriller set in modern America's age of anxiety. I'm wondering if categorically that's one of the reasons why it was not voted. And for things. That's more thriller. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'll do a little bit more research on that one, as to whether or not like I add that to my TBR. Moving on. I'm sorry to worry about this Black Box of Doom. Got 4,357 votes. And then after that, Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky got 3,380 votes. I am very surprised that Adrian Tchaikovsky, for the body of work that author has done, that Service Model did as low as it did. Even for name recognition alone. Yeah, I don't know. But it is on my TBR. Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell. Finished up after that with 3,303 votes. Okay. And then the final four here. 3,170 votes, Baby X by Kira Peikoff. That is on my TBR. Then The Blueprint by Rai Giana Rashad. 2,875 votes. What is this one about? Alternate United States. I'll research that a little bit more before I add it. Yours for the Taking by Gabrielle Korn. That's futuristic. Got 2,769 votes. It is on my TBR. And then in last place is In Ascension by Martin McGuinness. About a young microbiologist investigated unfathomable deep vent in ocean floor. 2,495 votes. That one I have not heard of, and I'll do a little bit more research to decide whether or not I'll add it to my TBR. But yeah, this is the science fiction category. I do think a lot of science fiction that should have been on in this category for Goodreads was missed being nominated, I feel like. And yeah, eh, though I'm not surprised that Ministry of Time ended up taking it based on what I've heard about it. And it's just not, yeah, I put it marked it as want to read. But and I do plan on reading it. I do plan on reading all of these in terms of like those that I've marked on my TBR, but definitely these first four I'm going to prioritize reading. But I do think the selection in this category was not as robust as I would have liked it to be, in terms of things. And I hope that more people get the chance to be able to be nominated next year, and have more wider selection of things in terms of the things. So that's my that's kind of my end thoughts on this respective category. So we'll move on to horror and keep it moving. I don't think there's that many more. Um, no, there's quite a number of categories to go. It's just disappointing in terms of because I was hoping for more titles that I would recognize, and some of which that would do better than what they are for these Goodreads Choice Awards. Let's move on to horror. To no one's collective surprise, Stephen King won this one with 60,901 votes, and it's a selection of short stories from Stephen King, from what I've heard. And I've heard that the quality of the stories is hit and miss from what people have said about it. But I think Stephen King won on name recognition. He got 60,901 votes for You Like It Darker, and there was a vote total of 287,996. Looking at all of these, big drop off between first and second. We Used to Live Here by Marcus Clower. That is being turned into a movie with Blake Lively, I believe. So I think that book got recognition for the adaptation that's supposed to be of it, from what I've heard. Um, I can't speak to it. It is on my TBR, but I have not read it yet. And then T. Kingfisher, What Feast at Night, got third place with 24,093 votes. That was a steep drop off between first, second, and third. And then Murder Road by Simone St. James. What I've read of Murder Road feels more like thriller than horror, but I have not read the whole of that respective book. It is, yeah, by Simone St. James. And I am familiar with Simone St. James as well in terms of things, but that got fourth place with 23,553 votes. I do plan on reading all of the top, at least the top. I may go ahead and just add Stephen King's You Like It Darker, like just to be able to read it, but I really want more people in terms of the horror category to be able to win other than Stephen King. And I feel like Stephen King's work here, based on the feedback that I've heard about it in terms of things, it should have gone to somebody else in this category rather than Stephen for this. But it is what it is. Chuck Tingle, I'm very happy, got fifth place with Bury Your Gaze. I had that as, I believe I have that as an art copy that I still need to fully read. But what little I've read of it, I did like, and I definitely have this on my TBR to be able to prioritize and read. That got fifth place with 20,207 votes. Following that is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim, 17,400 votes for sixth place. Josh Mallerman's Incidents Around the House, 15,757 votes. I Was This Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. That was one that I had voted for as well. 15,669 votes. I'm sad that it didn't make higher, but I am glad that it got in eighth place. Diavala by Jennifer Thorne got 15,154 votes, ninth place. And then Sleep Tight rounds out the top 10 by J.H. McCurt, 12,086 votes. And then for the books that did not make the first round, Rachel Harrison's So Thirsty. I am surprised that it didn't make it past the first round. Um, it is on my TBR. It is in my collection to be able to read. I have enjoyed Rachel Harrison's work previously, so that's one that was one of my highly anticipated releases for this respective year. So I'm planning on reading it and get my thoughts about it. But I'm disappointed it didn't make it past the first round. C.J. Coke's The Book of Witching got 5,333 votes. That's a relatively close vote total between these two. Very interesting. And then following that is Joanna Van Veen, My Darling Dreadful Thing. This one? I'm wondering why I didn't add it. I'll add it, yeah. That's one I'm interested in. And then A Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez. Yeah, I'll read that one too. That got the following place with 5,159 votes. Yeah, you can tell how very close some of these in the first round were in terms of the overarching votes. It wasn't a lot of votes compared to some of the other ones, but definitely very close in terms of the ranking for these respective ones. And then there's The Bog Wife by Kate Cronister. That's on my TBR. The Angel of Indian Lake. And again, like I said, I really wish that for these respective categories, like one book per author within the same category, because I do think that The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones split some votes with I Was a Teenage Slasher, but obviously I Was a Teenage Slasher got more votes and was able to make it past the first round. But yeah, moving right along. Indian Burial Ground by Nick Medina got 2,969 votes. That is way too low. It is. I think also Angel of Indian Lake deserved more votes than it got as well. And Indian Burial Ground should have gotten more votes than what it did. Both of those are on my TBR, and I'm looking forward to reading them. But it disappoints me that they weren't recognized to what they deserve to be recognized as. Less I say about that, the better. That can be a rant for another video. But moving right along, House of Bone and Rain by Gabino Iglesias. That is one that has been highly recommended to me multiple times from multiple people. That only had 1,945 votes. I'm definitely looking forward to reading that as well. This Cursed House by Del and Deer only had 1,690 votes, which I feel like it should have gotten more than that too, based on what I've heard of it. But I am looking forward to reading that also. And then last place, Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville got 820 votes. Wow. I'm kind of surprised, and I think that might be the lowest vote total that I've seen in this so far in terms of the lowest overall vote for the categories. But yeah, it's unfortunate. So not much really to reflect on for this. I do think other people should have the opportunity to be able to win this category other than Stephen King. Like if Stephen King like in terms of the things, like I've heard that the quality of these respective collectives of stories vary. I am planning on reading it myself to be able to see what those are like, but I've heard that this isn't Stephen King's strongest work in terms of the respective horror collection compared to some of his other work in terms of things. So like it is like in terms of like discussions that we've had like in the horror community in terms of things, I think it should have gone to somebody else this year, but it is what it is. Let's move on to debut novel. Okay, so How to End a Love Story won for favorite debut novel, which is interesting because How to End a Love Story did not get this many votes in the previous category that I was nominated in. It didn't even make it past the first round in romance. So it's interesting that it won here, but it didn't win in romance. But good for the author, like in terms of things. And it is one that I am planning on reading. And it was part of Reese's book club picks. There have been 3,370 uh, 337,947 votes total in this respective category, and How to End a Love Story won with 63,605 votes. So that's interesting to be able to see how that did. Following up with it to round out the top four, Ministry of Time, 44,473 votes. We Used to Live Here, 43,234 votes. And The Book of Doors, 34,967 votes. All of these I've talked about in their previous categories. It's interesting that for debut, this was how the vote total broke down. Relatively close between second and third, not so close between first and second, and not so close between third and fourth. But it is interesting to be able to see how they ranked. Then fifth through eighth place, Welcome to Hyungdong Bookshop, 33,169 votes. Martyr got 24,186 votes. Voyage of the Damned, which I was glad that it made the top 10 for this respective category, got 18,744 votes. The Eyes Are the Best Part got eighth place with 17,609 votes. Yeah, all of these look familiar. Danica Nava, who I really wish had been nominated for romance, did an impressive showing, getting ninth place with 17,134 votes. Did a wonderful job. Like, I'm happy that it was able to do as well as it did, and it was my choice for this respective category. I have it in my TBR. I started reading some of it, but I have not been able to finish it. But I do want to be able to reflect on this, hopefully before the end of the year. Hopefully before the end of the year. I'm not 100% sure if I'll be able to, though. And then Greta and Valden got 11,372 votes for the 10th place finish. Very steep drop off between these two because the vote total, starting with The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan, did not make it past the first round of the Goodreads votes. So let's go through those very quickly. 4,833 votes, The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. Daughters of Shandong by Eve J. Chung got 4,517 votes. Masquerade by Oo Sengoyomi got 4,344 votes. The Things We Didn't Know by Elba Iris Perez, 3,372 votes. I'm not sure why. Young Girls Childhood Between 1950s Puerto Rico and... Okay. Yeah, I'll read that one. I'll also read this one too by Eve J. Chung. Moving right along, All We Were Promised by Ashton Lattimore, 3,316 votes. Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon, 3,000 votes exactly. I'll do a little bit of research on that one to see whether I picked that one up or not. Sky Full of Elephants, Sibo Campbell, 1,899 votes. That's interesting in terms of the vote total compared to where it was nominated before. Fire Exit by Morgan Talty, 1,672 votes. Shred Sisters, Betsy Lerner, 1,515 votes. And then Victim by Andrew Borgia got 986 votes. Yeah, not much to say about this category other than what I've already mentioned. Many of these are repeats from previous categories, and all of these are debuts. So it's interesting to be able to see how these pan out. I am planning on reading several of these and giving my thoughts about them. So not really much else to say about it. Let's move on to a new category, which is audiobook. And this is where I am going to mention something that I mentioned before in reflecting on the Goodreads Choice Awards winners. So Funny Story also won this category, but not for the book, but is for the audiobook narration, which was done by Julia Whalen. And I am not surprised that Julia Whalen won this respective category, and well deserved, because Julia Whalen's one of my favorite audiobook narrators. But it's interesting in terms of how this pans out, because Julia Whalen does the narration for both Funny Story as well as Kristen Hanna's The Women, which I thought was very interesting, and I'm not surprised that both of these are the top two picks. I am surprised in terms of how big the vote total was, considering they're both the same audiobook narrator, but that is interesting in terms of how that worked out. So Emily Henry won it for Julia Whalen won it for Funny Story by Emily Henry with 72,571 votes, followed by her narration of Kristen Hanna's The Women, which got 61,305 votes. And I'm going to just briefly go through each of these. Note that these are awards that are given to the narrators of these respective works, so it's not just the books. It is for the narrators of these respective books in terms of their narration for things. So, though I wonder, how many people were thinking about that when they voted for this category, because really, since there is no mention of the audiobook narrators directly on each of these books, I think like a lot of people probably didn't think about that in terms of when they voted for these respective books. So I think in the future, Goodreads does need to make it more clear as to whom is narrating each of these audiobooks, so that they can be um, recognized for the work that they do for these respective works, and that not just for featuring the title and the author and terms of things. This award is specifically for the narrators who do these works, and they should be recognized as such. So I'll leave it at that. But Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer, got third with 54,828 votes. Listen for the Lie by Amy Tara got fourth place, 36,352 votes. The Andrew Garfield and multicast narration of 1984 got 35,733 votes. TJ Klune's Somewhere Beyond the Sea got 30,449 votes. First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston, 26,530 votes. James by Percival Everett got 20,610 votes. I have that on audiobook, so I am definitely going to listen to the performance of that. Sharon McMahon's The Small and Mighty got 18,334 votes. And then rounding out the top 10, Richard Osman's We Solve Murders got 16,739 votes for that audiobook narration. And then for the books that didn't make it past the first round for audiobooks, we have Ina Garten's Be Ready When the Luck Happens, read by the author. And then From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Coe, 6,167 votes. The Anxious Generation got 5,792 votes, by Jonathan Holt. Sally Rooney's Intermezzo, which I thought probably would have gotten higher than what it got, but it may have been the audiobook narrator in terms of what people were thinking about for this respective one. I don't know. This got 5,588 votes. Whoopi Goldberg, Bits and Pieces, which was narrated by the author, if I remember correctly, 4,123 votes. Leanne Moriarty, 4,101 votes. It's Not You by Ramani Durvasula, Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People, got 3,214 votes. Liz Cheney's Oath and Honor, 3,180 votes. Maybe This Time by Cara Bostone, 3,174 votes. And then last place, Revenge of the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, 2,422 votes. So not much for me to say about this respective category in terms of things. I think Julia Whalen definitely deserved to win. Now, whether or not it should have been for The Funny Story of the Women, I'm not sure. I am planning on reading both of those eventually. I'm just not sure when. But she typically does a very strong audiobook narration, and she's one of my favorites. So I'm glad that she won it in terms of this respective category. Moving on for young adult fantasy. So I'm not surprised that the winner of this, this is the follow-up to a very popular book, Divine Rivals. This is the sequel, Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. It has gotten 93,230 votes out of a total vote count of 426,420 votes. And I kind of had an idea that it might win because it is a very popular follow-up for young adult fantasy. Very popular title. I don't know when I'm going to be able to pick up that respective series because it is a St. Martin's Press title, and I'm still participating in the boycott for that. So it's on my TBR. I own it. I don't know when I'm going to pick that up though, or review it yet. Reckless by Lauren Roberts got second place with 85,070 votes. That is the sequel to Powerless, if I remember correctly, yes. And it got 85,070 votes. I'm not too surprised about that based on the buzz about it. Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. That is the first book in the Crimson Moss series, 62,945 votes. And then following that is Holly Black's The Prisoner's Throne, which is the second book in the Soul and Air duology. I have not read the first book in that respective duology, so it's not on my TBR. But big drop off between second and third and fourth for this respective category. So just that's interesting in terms of how that ended up being what it was. Moving forward, Brandon Sanderson's Defiant should not have been nominated in this category. It is technically sci-fi, it is not fantasy. And I think they could have done a better job of separating out sci-fi from fantasy. Either make young adult sci-fi more distinct, like if you're going to group sci-fi and fantasy like in a collective category, designate sci-fi. Otherwise, Brandon Sanderson should not have been nominated for this respective uh, category, respectively spoken. And like this is the fourth book in the Skyward series. Yes, it is on my TBR. I do own all of the books in the Skyward series. I have not reviewed them for my channel quite yet. I do plan on doing so. So, Don't Let the Force In by C.C. Drews came in at sixth place with 23,297 votes, followed by Where the Library Hides. That is the follow-up to Isabella Ibanez's Secrets of the Nile series. It's the second book in that respective series. It got 19,417 votes. Following up with the top eight, in eighth place is with 17,953 votes is Wisteria by Adeline Grace. That is a long-running series that started with Belladonna. It is the third book in that respective series. I'm not surprised that it did as well as it did. I'm kind of surprised it didn't even do better than what it did for this respective category, though. Air by Saba Tahir, I had voted for. I wish it had finished higher than what it did. It got 16,771 votes. It did a respectable ninth place. So, and then rounding out the top 10, All This Twisted Glory by Tara Mafi. That is the third book in the Woven Kingdom series. It got 12,633 votes. I'm not surprised considering how popular the author Tara Mafi is. Now, whether or not it deserved to be in the top 10, I'm not sure because I have not read that series. So I don't know. And then looking at all the books that uh, didn't make it into past the first, didn't make it past the first round into the finals round. First is the Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Oranek. That is on my TBR already. I am planning on reading that. Followed by Immortal Dark uh, by T.S. Germa is the first book in the Immortal Dark trilogy. I've mentioned this before. I'm glad that it didn't win the YA category because I really feel like this book, even with how juvenile it is written, even with the age of the protagonist, I think it would have better been served as a new adult novel. Just my opinion. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I feel like that book, comparatively speaking to all the other books that are in this category, it really does not fit YA fantasy like in the way that many of these other titles do. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I do plan on reading that to be able to reflect on it in full. I started reading part of it, but like couldn't hold on to my copy of it from my library because it had so many holes. But I wasn't in love with it when I picked it up in terms of things, if I'm being honest about it. So like I told myself I would just come to it to finish it later. But I do think it's kind of the odd one out in terms of all the nominees in this respective category. I don't, yeah, yeah, I think it is the odd one out, and I think it would have fit better in terms of being new adult than it would be in YA. But that's just my opinion. Moving on, so Let Them Burn by Camilla Cole. That got 3,911 votes. The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. I actually own a copy of that book as well. Both so Let Them Burn. I am planning on reading that as well as the Invocations. That the Invocations got 3,409 votes. Followed also by The Poisons We Drink by Bethany Baptiste, which was my vote for the initial round, but it did not make it past the initial round, unfortunately. Um, which I'm sad about because I feel like Bethany Baptiste like deserves a lot better than um like being able to be recognized like for her work in terms of things. But I do plan on giving a full review of The Poisons We Drink as well in terms of things. Dragon Fruit by so The Poisons We Drink got 3,180 votes. And then followed by Dragon Fruit, which is by Makia Lucier. This one I have not heard of, and I've never seen this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know this book. Um, and it didn't. It's got some ratings, but not that many in terms of things. It's got a 3.88 average rating on Goodreads. And it got 3,138 votes. But yeah, I have not heard of that book. Is that something that I want to read? I'll look into it a little bit more and see if I want to add it to my TBR. Then rounding out the final four, The Darkness Within Us by Trisha Levenseller. Yeah, this is the sequel to The Shadows Between Us. I've heard of it. I have not read the first book in that series. Of Jade and Dragons, so The Darkness Within Us got 3,007 votes. Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen is the first book in the Fall of Dragon series. It got 2,650 votes. I will add that to my list. And then Emily Varga's For She Is Wrath got 2,404 votes. That is already on my TBR. And then Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrew got rounds out this list with 2,136 votes. So not much to really say about young adult fantasy, like in terms of things. I do think some of these, unfortunately, like the Brandon Sanderson book, were miscategorized. And Immortal Dark, I feel like, was miscategorized as well. I do feel strongly about that, but I know it's not a popular opinion. But I do think I do think there needs to be a greater selection in terms of being able to accurately reflect both categorically, like young adult fantasy as well as young adult sci-fi, and being able to have a distinction between that as well. Um, but it's unfortunate that this one didn't have even more of a range of titles. And then also, like, in terms of the fact that, like, there are so many other young adult fantasy titles that didn't even make this list that should have been recognized on here. But I'll put a pin in it and do a separate video on that in terms of other titles that I feel like should have been nominated and should have gotten their flowers that were released this year. So I'll leave that where it is. Let's move on to young adult fiction. There are so many young adult fiction titles that were released this year that weren't even nominated. I am disappointed. It's not that I'm disappointed in the fact that Heartstopper won. I think Heartstopper is a great series. I think Alice Oseman deserves, flowers for creating this respective series. I don't think it should have won for young adult fiction. It should have won for graphic novel or comics, which is a category that Goodreads got rid of. I think that if it had been placed in the proper category in terms of things, I would have been more happy about this win. But unfortunately, it meant that so many other great young adult books didn't get recognized because of that. And also the fact that Heartstopper, this is the fifth volume of this respective series, but it really should have been in comics or graphic novel and recognized in it. So there's a little bit of category fraud in this. That's where my upset is. It's not the fact that the work itself doesn't deserve to win. It's not for this category. is how I feel about it, and I feel pretty strongly about it, and that's where my disappointment is. Moving right along, having said that, I do plan on reading and reviewing the Heartstopper series in terms of things. Holly Jackson, I am not surprised, did as well as it did. To reflect just like how the vote totals are, like briefly going through it, 81,335 votes came in for Heartstopper Volume 5 out of 392,309 votes total for this respective category. So a lot of people did show up to vote for this one. The second place finish was a wide margin between Heartstopper and the reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. I am not surprised Holly Jackson got second place. I would have expected Holly Jackson to win this category if the category had been actually like reflective of the titles. Um, like in terms of the categories that it should have been distinguished as. I am surprised that Lynn Painter got third place with 38,241 votes for Nothing Like the Movies. So that's how I feel about it. I don't really have like any other thoughts about that particular placement. Fourth place, The Grandest Game, which is part of the Inheritance Game series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, got 34,710 votes, which it's a popular series. I'm not surprised to see it. I think other people should have gotten it. Yeah, I'll say it like that. If Only I Had Told Her by Laura Nolan is the follow up to If He Had Been With Me, which If He Had Been With Me is a book that I read and liked years ago that I have read, and the sequel came out. I have not read this particular book yet, but I do have it in my collection, and I did pick it up from, I think it was Target if I remember correctly. So I am planning on reading that follow up when I get a chance. I'm not surprised with respect to how much buzz and how much it's been discussed that it got fifth place with 28,990 votes. Pretty solid finish. I do plan on reading it. Betting on You by Lynn Painter. I am very surprised that it got sixth place with 25,253 votes. I do plan on reading that. Try Lynn Painter in terms of things. I've heard mixed opinions about this respective author, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I'm glad that We're Sleeping Girls Lie finished the way that it did in seventh place. With 24,048 votes. Do I wish it had done higher? Yeah. And I'm in the middle of reading that actually right now and trying to see if I can finish it before the end of the year. I like it a lot so far, but it's very, very heavy with respect to some of its respective themes. But I understand why people gravitate towards it, and with how well it has done in this respective category. So good for Where Sleeping Girls Lie. And then That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. I'm not surprised that that did as well as it did because I did pick that up from my local Barnes and Noble. It had a lot of buzz this year. It got eighth place with 21,617 votes. I am planning on reading that. I have not had the opportunity to get to it this year. Will I read it before the end of this year? I'm not 100% sure. If it's not by the end of this year, it may be by the end of January that I can get to it at the earliest. We'll see. We'll see. Famous last words. A Thousand Broken Pieces by Tilly Cole. I am not interested in reading that. It got 21,254 votes. A lot of people have been talking about it. It's not my cup of tea. Not interested. Moving on. Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher, 17,830 votes, and I think that rounds out the top 10. in terms of things. Then we get into ones that did not make it past the first round, starting with Dungeons and Drama, which looks interesting to me based on the cover by Christy Boyes. Yeah, and it's the first in the series called Dungeons and Drama. So I'll add that. Apparently, I did not add it before, but it's getting added now. It got 11th place with 7,510 votes. And then Anne Liang's I Hope This Doesn't Find You. I have this book in my, I was able to pick this up this past year in a book haul. I don't know, I think I may have featured it in one of my videos beforehand. If I did, then I'll link the respective video for you. If not, then I'll put it in my showcase to be able to showcase that because I did pick that up this year. 7,381 votes, and I'm very much looking forward to it based on the premise. Moving right along. So, A Crane Among Wolves by Jane Hur. 6,249 votes. I'm very surprised that didn't get higher than what it did. Most Ardently, I am very surprised by Gabe Cole Navoa did not get higher than 5,615 votes. It feels like it should have gotten way higher than that. And I own this in my collection. Let me go ahead and put that on my TBR. It's already, I already own it. I'm planning on reading it. I don't know if I'll be able to get it to it by the end of this year, but I do plan on reading and giving my thoughts about it. It's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, so of course, um, I'm going to be able to. I'm looking forward to reading that. It was one of my most anticipated titles for release this year, so I definitely plan on reading it. Icarus by Kay Ancrum. I've heard a lot of great things about it, and it is on my TBR list, and I do plan on reading that as soon as I can. It got 4,111 votes. I would have expected it to do better than what it did, but yeah. Moving on to Maureen Johnson's Death at Morning House. I am familiar with Maureen Johnson. It got 3,894 votes. I don't know about, I don't know how well received Death at Morning House was. I think it is a standalone novel. I don't think it has anything to do with the Truly Devious books. I think it's just its own thing. But I'll read more reflections on that before I decide to add that to my TBR. When the World Tips Over by Jandy Nelson got 3,028 votes um, to round up the bottom four, followed by Bond Me for Two by Trinity E. Gen, 2,610 votes. Diana Urban's Under the Surface got 1,616 votes. And Thirsty by Jas Hammonds deserved way more praise than 946 votes. I started reading Thirsty. I liked it a lot. It's a heavy subject matter, but it does so well with the subject of addiction. I understand that it may be a difficult to read for some readers, but it does so well with its respective themes that it should have done so much better in this category than what it did. It did not deserve last place. I'll say it like that. It's a very strong and well done novel, and I do plan on reading it in full and giving my thoughts about it. I think that I will prioritize finishing that before the end of the year to be able to reflect on it, to say how strong it is. I wish it had gotten more love. I wish it had gotten more love here. Moving on to nonfiction, we're rounding out this respective video. And this is, I know this is going to be a long video for me to edit, so I'm going to try to see if I can wrap this up a little bit in terms of things, especially since there are such few categories left. Yeah, nonfiction, memoir, and history and biography are the last ones here. So, for readers' favorite nonfiction, this one was surprising to me. that it got number one, especially considering some information about it that came out in terms of like how it's like its respective research and other things was done. But it did win 39,553 votes out of a total of 267,009 votes total. It is on my TBR. I am going to give it a try, but I've heard some very pointed critiques about the Anxious Generation in terms of how it chooses to make its respective arguments. So I'm taking it with a grain of salt. Taking it with a grain of salt, and I am going to read it. Second place was It's Not Hysteria by Karen Tang. Karen Tang. Everything you need to know about your reproductive health, considering the conversations that have been happening. I'm not surprised this is second place with 28,181 votes. That is one I'm planning to read. I am very happy that The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates got third place. That was the one that I wanted to win and the one that I voted for. But I'm not mad about the fact that it made third place. I'm very happy that it did as well as it did with 24,789 votes. Rounding out the top four is Want by Gillian Anderson. I'm not surprised that Gillian Anderson's book did as well as it did, especially for name recognition and for the subject matter that it covers, and that seeks enough that I know about it. But I am planning on reading it. 24,511 votes. So yeah. Amy Tan's The Backyard Bird Chronicles got fifth place with 22,608 votes. I am planning on reading that. All in Her Head by Elizabeth Coleman. The Truth and Lies Early Medicine Taught Us About Women's Bodies and Why It Matters Today. I'm not surprised it did as well as it did. 19,797 votes. Kate Kennedy's One in a Millennial, 19,641 votes for seventh place. John Grisham rounds out the top eight with 19,463 votes for Framed alongside Jim McCloskey. Ninth place, 17,813 votes. The Untold Story of the Rise and Fall of the Disney Channel's Tween Empire, Disney High by Ashley Spencer. I am planning on reading that. And then rounding out the top 10 is Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson with 13,496 votes. And then we get to the ones that did not make it past the first round. Dr. Jen Gunter's Blood, The Science, Medicine, and Mythology of Menstruation, 5,532 votes. I'm Sorry for My Loss by Rebecca Little and Colleen Long got 5,177 votes. Actually, is this one that I want to read? Reproductive Care. Yeah, I can read that just because I'm curious. Revenge of the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, 4,722 votes. The Devil at His Elbow by Valerie Bauerlein. Alex Murdaugh and the Fall of the Southern Dynasty, 4,174 votes. The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, American Evangelicals in an Age of Extremism, got 3,952 votes. Feel Good Productivity, How to Do More of What Matters to You, 3,657 votes. And then rounding out the bottom four, How to Tell When We Will Die by Joanna Hedeva, 3,466 votes. Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg, 3,282 votes. Sing Sing, The Sing Sing Files, One Journalist, Six Innocent Men, and a 20-Year Fight for Justice by Dan Slepian, got 1,678 votes. I'm actually going to put that on my TBR because I am curious about that. And then last place is Meditation for Mortals by Oliver Berkman, 1,517 votes. Really not much to say else about this one, so I'm going to move on to Memoir. And I'm not surprised. I am currently reading this book right now on audio. This is The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. And she plays the grandmother in Gilmore Girls. So a lot of nostalgia in terms of this one. I'm not surprised. And I'm actually happy for Kelly Bishop. This won with 80,050 votes out of a total vote total of 299,079 votes total. And clear landslide here. Clear landslide here in terms of the finishing books. Because the next one that got second place with 29,641 votes was Sociopath, a memoir by Patrick Gagne. I've heard mixed opinions about this one. I'm not adding it to my TBR just yet because I do want to see what other people think and feel about how that particular book was done. So I'll leave it where it is in terms of things. And then rounding out in third place is From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Coe, 25,638 votes. I am planning on reading that. Drew Afualo with Loud, 24,899 votes for fourth place. RuPaul's The House of Hidden Meanings, it has the fifth place finish with 24,283 votes. Gardens, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, has sixth place with 22,772 votes. Knife by Salman Rushdie, 20,355 votes for seventh place. And eighth place is Liz Cheney's Oath and Honor, 13,711 votes. I'm not surprised that it did as well as it did. I have not read that yet. See, My Escape from Christian Patriarchy, A Well-Trained Wife by Tia Levings, 13,302 votes. I am planning on reading that. And Whoopi Goldberg rounds out the top 10 with Bits and Pieces, 12,690 votes. And I'm planning on reading that as well. Then we get to the books that did not make it past the first round. Grief is for People by Sloane Crossley, 4,461 votes. I should be telling you this, but I'm going to anyway, by Chelsea Devontes, 4,405 votes. I had voted for in the first round, and I had started this book, but I did not finish it. There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. It got 4,149 votes, but unfortunately did not get past the first round. I am planning on reading that though. Friday Afternoon Club by Griffin Dunn, 3,350 votes. I'm going to read more into that one in terms of things. See what people think about it. An Unfinished Love Story by Doris Kearns Goodwin, 2,981 votes. The Wives, a Memoir by Simone Orindo, 2,921 votes. Hereafter by Amy Lynn, 2,919 votes. My Side of the River by Elizabeth Camilo Gutierrez, 2,562 votes, and I have that on my TBR already. The Manicurist's Daughter, a Memoir by Susan Liu. This is got next to last place with 2,082 votes. I will put this on my TBR to read it because I'm curious. And then last is Wanted Toddler's Personal Assistant by Stephanie Kaiser, 1,908 votes. Okay, not much else for me to say about this respective category. We're going to go ahead and go into the last category, which is history and biography for this. So, to no surprise, in terms of things, of course, something related to bookshops would win this category. So, the winner of this respective category with 38,847 votes is The Bookshop, History of the American Bookstore by Evan Friss. Won this category out of a total of 242,126 votes total. To see the other runners up and rankings, Sharon McMahon got the second place finish with The Small and the Mighty, 31,360 votes. It's not too much of a gap, but still a gap between the first and second place. I am planning on reading both of these. I would have thought the winner would have been Eric Larson's The Demon of Rust based on how popular that author is, but got third place, 26,235 votes, followed by in fourth place The Elements of Marie Curie by Dava Sorgel, 21,644 votes. American Scary, which I figure would probably do well based on its premise and title. 18,934 votes, but I don't, and I do plan on reading it, but it only got 258 ratings. So it's interesting in terms of how well it did for how few have actually rated it in terms of things. It is on my TBR though. It is on my TBR though. Women in the Valley of Kings, The Untold Story of Women Egyptologists in the Gilded Age by Kathleen Shepard, got sixth place with 17,443 votes. Yuval Noah Harari, A Nexus, which is a brief history of information networks from the Stone Age to AI, got 17,400 votes. Seventh place. Ask Not, I thought this book would have done better based on its subject matter, but this is The Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed by Maureen Callahan, got 16,644 votes, but it did make eighth place, so it did respectable in terms of things. It did respectable. Challenger, which is another one that I was interested in being able to pick up in terms of things, did ninth place with 12,631 votes. I am planning on reading that. Douglas Preston's The Lost Tomb rounds out the top 10 with 11,334 votes. Really not much to say about that top 10. Rounding out the ones that did not make it past the first round, we have When Women Ran Fifth Avenue, Glamour and Power at the Dawn of American Fashion. Got 4,309 votes. I'm actually putting that on my TBR because I'm interested. I am interested in reading that. Anime Wong's Not Your China Doll, written with Katie G. Salisbury. Um, see. Yeah, Not Your China Doll, The Wild and Simmering Life of Anime Wong by Katie G. Salisbury. Got 4,230 votes. Madness by Antonia Hilton. I really think that this could have easily made top 10, based on what I've heard about it, and it is on my TBR, and I did vote for it in the first round, which is Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. Got 3,777 votes. I'm definitely planning on reading that. I don't know if I'll get to it by the end of this year, but I do plan on putting it as a priority to be able to read at least even into the first of the new year. By the Fire We Carry, this is another one that I feel like should have gotten in the top 10 as well, but unfortunately did not make it. The Generations Long Fight for Justice on Native Land, by Rebecca Nagel, 3,472 votes. I definitely plan on reading this as well. George Stephanopoulos, The Situation Room, The Inside Story of Presidents in Crisis, 3,051 votes. Hampton Sides, The Wide, Wide Sea. Imperial Ambition, First Contact, and The Faithful Final Voyage of Captain James Cook, 2,572 votes. When the Sea Came Alive, An Oral History of D-Day by Garrett M. Graff, 2,450 votes. Ben McIntyre, The Siege, 2,166 votes. Everyone Who Is Gone Here by Jonathan Slitzer. The United States, Central America, and the Making of a Crisis, 2,040 votes. And then Eden Undone, The True Story of Sex, Murder, and Utopia at the Dawn of World War II by Abbott Calhoun rounds out the nominees with 1,591 votes in the final round of the Goodreads Choice Awards. I don't have a lot to add at the end of this video in terms of the overarching Goodreads Choice Awards for this year. I do think the missing categories of poetry, of middle grade, of children's, of comics and graphic novels, of so many categories that they eliminated in this respective awards thing. It like the absence of these categories is definitely felt and missed. And I also think there's a lot of improvements that they could be doing for not only showcasing a range of these different categories, but also being able to accurately reflect these categories in terms of being able to label some of these, like some of the sci-fi books should not be labeled as fantasy. Some of the young adult books, in terms of things, if it's a graphic novel, it should be in a comics or graphic novel category. Multiple authors should not be nominated for the same category. Like, some of the things that I've talked about during this reflection in terms of things. I hope that they can improve this process. I don't know if they will. I will be here next year, probably ranting and raving about who's nominated in terms of things. So I'll be back for another year in terms of this if they do it next year for being able to reflect on things. But I feel like some of the choices made sense, others of them did not. I was happy about some of the people who were recognized, but others of them I'm like, why? Like, for what reason in terms of things? So, you know, it's a matter of opinion. And I do feel like there are a lot of books that I want to be able to get to that I was able to mark on my TPR because of the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I do plan on getting to a lot of them in terms of things. If not by the end of the year, then definitely within the new year, and being able to try to see if I can shave off like several of my overly large TBR, even from other Goodreads Choice Awards previous winners in terms of things. But I'll keep you posted. That is my overarching thoughts on the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2024 in terms of the winners. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to be informed of when I post new videos. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.